Hello, and thank you for joining us for tonight's event. My name is Bailey. I'm an event host here at Powell's Books in Portland, Oregon. Before we begin, I want to encourage you to check out our lineup of upcoming virtual and in-person events by visiting our website at powells.com and clicking on the events tab at the top of the page. Please remember to follow us on our various social media channels such as Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Tonight, we're honored to welcome the author Adib Khorram in conversation with Aiden Thomas to discuss Adib's novel, Kiss and Tell. Hunter never expected to be a boy band star, but well, here he is. He and his band Kiss and Tell are on their first major tour of North America, playing arenas all over the United States and Canada, and getting covered by the gossipy press all over North America as well. Hunter is the only gay member of the band, and he just had a very painful breakup with his first boyfriend. Leaked sex, public heartbreak, and all. And now everyone expects him to play the perfect queer role model for teens. But Hunter isn't really sure what being the perfect queer kid even means. Does it mean dressing up in whatever the label tells him to wear for photo shoots and pretending never to have sex? Unfortunately, yes. Does it mean finding community among the queer kids at the meet and greets after Kiss and Tell shows? Fortunately, yes. Does it include a new relationship with Kaivan, the star of the band opening for Kiss and Tell on tour? He hopes so. But when the label finds out about Hunter and Kaivan, it spells trouble for the relationship, for the perfect gay boy Hunter plays for the cameras, and most importantly, for Hunter himself. Adib Khorram is an author of Darius the Great is Not Okay, Darius the Great Deserves Better, and the picture book 7 Special Somethings, A No Ruse Story. His debut novel, Darius the Great is Not Okay, earned several awards, including the William C. Morris Debut Award, the Asian Pacific American Award for Young Adult Literature, and a Boston Globe Horn Book Honor. He is joining us from Kansas City, Missouri. Adib will be joined in conversation by Aiden Thomas. Aiden is a New York Times bestselling author of Cemetery Boys, Lost in the Neverwoods, and the upcoming The Sunbearer Trials. Aiden is joining us from Massachusetts. This evening's event will also include a Q&A. Please use the Q&A button located at the bottom of your screen if you'd like to ask a question at any time. If someone has already typed a question that you'd also like to know the answer to, please upvote that particular question. Perhaps most importantly, please support Adib, Aiden, and Powell's by purchasing a copy of Kiss and Tell or any of Aiden's books. Keep an eye out in the chat where we'll be sharing links to purchase these titles. All right, and with that, let's give a warm virtual welcome to Adib and Aiden.
Thank you so much, Bailey. Adib, hello. I'm so excited to be chatting with you tonight. Thank you so much for inviting me. I am so thrilled about this book. How has the release week been going?
It has been weird and chaotic and really wonderful. This is my 3rd pandemic release, and so I feel like I've kind of gotten into the groove.
You're on number 3. Yeah, that's impressive. Right? I'll be there in September, and we'll be in the 3 club.
I know, right? I was thinking this morning, I was like, wait, did Cemetery Boys come out in 19 or 20? I feel like it was 20.
Yeah, it was 20.
And I was like,
yeah,
time is a flat circle. But it's great, because in Missouri, the governor has decided that COVID is it's canceled. Right. Restrictions are opening up, and also we're just less densely populated, and so with certain mitigations it's possible to do things. And so I actually did an in-person launch at my local indie here in town as well, and got to see my friends and family and pretend to be famous for a moment, and it was really really nice. Julian Winters sent some cupcakes as well because he's the devil.
Julian is incredibly kind. That sounds really fun.
It was really, it was really, I didn't realize how much I had missed that. And I hope things are still great in the fall and you can do something and something in person. I would like that for you. Because
I would also really like that for me.
There's nothing quite
so
like
Powell's, hit me up.
Right.
So I think let's just kind of get started with the questions that I have, if that sounds good to you. And just a reminder, y'all can submit your questions, and then we'll be doing that in the last 10 or 15 minutes. So to get us started, can you tell us a little bit about your journey for writing Kiss and Tell? Where did you get the inspiration and the idea from?
It is a winding road. So the story starts back in 2014, actually. I was watching a random music awards show. It might have been the American music, no, Video Music Awards, like the MTV, one of those things. I don't
a
normally
good one.
watch them. It just happened to be on.
Yeah.
In my day job that I used to have before the pandemic, I worked in audio, video, and lighting for live events. And so I've spent a lot of time around various things, never like a big production like that. But like I was kind of, I spent a lot of my life backstage also as a theater kid growing up. And so I was watching this music awards show and wondering what sorts of shenanigans were going on backstage. Recently, there had been a food poisoning incident at one of our events. We didn't cause it. We don't cater. The caterer.
Oh no.
Just maybe the chicken should have been cooked a little longer.
Oh no.
And I was like, anyway, I found myself thinking like, I wonder if anyone ever gets food poisoning at these awards shows. I wonder what's going on backstage. What if like everyone except for one band got food poisoning? And somehow my thoughts just like spiraled out from there of like, what if it was a boy band? What if only one member of the boy band survived? What if someone was trying to murder a boy band? So I ended up writing a really terrible mystery about someone trying to murder this boy in a boy band after he comes out as gay and becomes too popular and they have to kill him. It never made sense. I write by the seat of my pants. I don't know what I'm doing. I never know what I'm doing until the book is already done. And it turns out that's a terrible way to write a mystery, because apparently you have to know who did it and why they did it. And you have to like leave clues and red herrings. And it was a terrible book. But I finished it in like early 2015. I actually wrote the end of it. I wrote the end on a Monday in March of 2015, and I was very excited to like let it rest for a little while and then go revise it. And then literally I finished on a Monday, and on Tuesday, Publishers Weekly sends out their deal announcements of all the books that have been acquired. And one was announced called Kill the Boy Band. And I was like, I had to like lay on the ground for a while.
Oh my God, isn't that just the way though?
It was so the way. It was so the way. And then, okay, fast forward a while, this book is like written and done. And then like, we're getting ready to announce it. And like 2 weeks before I announce it, another gay boy band book is announced. And I was like, it happened again. But this time our books were thankfully very different. Anyway, so Tuesday I laid on the ground in despair. I was visiting the Iranian side of my family for Nowruz. They live in Vancouver, British Columbia. And so I was like, what's something that only I can possibly write? And I started writing Darius that Wednesday. And so that ended up becoming my debut. And so it all worked out in the end. But fast forward to 2020, it's like January of 2020. Darius the Great Deserves Better is all done, and I'm trying to decide what to write next. And I find myself thinking about gay boys and boy bands again. But with less murder and more, I expect you have felt this at times, that like, even though being an author doesn't feel like that much of being a public figure, it is still sometimes a lot. And people don't always respect your boundaries, and people get really weird. And I was thinking a lot about like what it means to be a queer author, and particularly a queer author writing for young people and trying to make the world better for them. And so the book, I started writing again about Hunter. He and his friends, like their names never changed from that first draft back in 2014. Pretty much
that's cool.
Everything else changed, but like the band itself and kind of their personality archetypes stayed the same. They got much more fleshed out and real. So I started writing, like actually writing it, and like toward the end of February 2020, right before all the lockdowns happened. And then I got to write it all during the pandemic, and that was the worst.
The
worst. I just got really, really depressed, and it was really hard writing, and it was even harder editing. And I think it was either my second or third edit letter. One of the notes from my editor was, somehow this book came out really heavy, and boy bands are supposed to be fun. Can we put some fun back into the book? And I was like, oh my God, I've made it awful. She's like, no, you didn't make it awful. And I was like, can you just call me and tell me I'm pretty?
Oh my God.
Like, yes, let's talk Friday. So she talked me off my cliff. I did make the book happier, and it did finally like come out. And I'm really, really, as hard as everything was, I'm very, very proud of it. Even though I think it's always going to be my pandemic baby. But also,
I mean, we all have one at this point.
We do.
Or multiple.
I know, right? Yeah, because this is the first one that I like literally every step of it happened during the pandemic. The others have been like done and just released in the pandemic.
Yeah.
But I love it very much, and I love Hunter and his friends very much. So
Yeah.
that's
That's
the long and winding and
I
very
love
bizarre
that
story.
long and winding story.
I know,
And
right?
I think that that's um very valid and kind of what everyone is experiencing with the pandemic. It's like suddenly our stories are really heavy. I wonder why. So that's very
Mhm.
relatable. Um, so okay, so are you like a boy band fan, or what made you want to like specifically write about boy bands? Like,
I
was there
am
one in like a quintessential boy band for you or something?
I am a boy band fan. I was very closeted as a teenager,
Yeah.
and so I loved the Backstreet Boys. And
Yes.
I remember staying up late to watch Saturday Night Live, and like they came on to perform "I Want It That Way" and Nick Carter
Yeah.
with the beautiful golden middle part.
Yes.
And I didn't know it at the time, but it was an awakening. But of course, as any 16-year-old boy that thinks / is pretending to be straight would do, I was like, they're fine, whatever. They're for the girls. But I loved them. I loved
Yeah.
them so much. I didn't like NSYNC as much. Justin Timberlake always struck me as just one of those white people that doesn't shower enough. And I felt like I went to middle school with a lot of people like that, and high school with, again, many of those same people.
Right.
So he gave me pause. He just, in the same way that Justin Bieber gives me pause, as he just has strong, like, would have bullied you in middle school vibes to him.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, not an NSYNC fan. And then I feel like, I don't know, I feel like there was a good like 10 years where boy bands kind of died down for a while.
Yeah.
And then they exploded again with One Direction.
Yeah.
Which I didn't really get into until like their third album, Midnight Memories, which somehow like I had been aware of them, but that was the first time I like listened to their music, and I was like, oh, this is actually quite good.
Yeah.
But at that point I was like getting a little older, and it was like a little creepy to like them too much. They're all like young, and I was not young anymore. But I love their music. And then seeing the wave of K-pop and how like,
oh my God, yes.
like boy bands are getting kind of decolonized is very exciting, but also very intimidating, because BTS fans are very intense.
Yeah.
And so I like BTS music, but I don't call myself a BTS fan because I lack the knowledge base.
Yeah, it's an intimidating fandom to kind of insert yourself into.
Right. And then of course, like 3 weeks ago, Pixar came out with Turning Red, and I am definitely a 4-townie. Just like hardcore. Every time I find a new GIF, I add it to my folder so I can use it constantly. People are getting sick of me.
But yes, I mean, those are brilliant.
There is something, I don't know, there's something really fun and something very queer about boy bands. Especially growing up, we mostly tell teenage boys, like, go play football. Like,
yeah,
I don't know, somehow boy bands feel like the opposite of toxic masculinity. Even though in a lot of ways they're still upholding the patriarchy, and the media landscape around them definitely upholds the patriarchy. And says like, oh, it's only for tween girls and therefore unimportant, and it's lowbrow, even though there's like amazing songs being written. And so because they just felt very gay and also very fun, I was just like, this seems like a great thing to write a book about.
Yeah, I love that. I was an NSYNC fan, but I didn't like Justin at all. I liked Lance, which should have
yes, I know, right?
To me.
Who could have predicted? I never trusted frosted spiky tips.
I mean, yeah, no, that's totally valid. Like,
but also good for him. Didn't he go to space at one point?
He did, or something like that. It's wild. I was also a huge Jonas Brothers fan. Like, Joe Jonas was the love of my life. Like, still is.
I don't blame you. I like the Jonas Brothers, but there was always something a little, just, as a gay boy, there was just something a little alarmingly Jesus-y about them at times.
Oh yes, absolutely.
And I was like, would they hate crime me? I can't quite tell. And like, as they got older, I think they shed that part of their like persona. But definitely I was like, they definitely gave me a little pause. But also, yes, very pretty.
So you kind of touched base on this already. I am learning about you that you're a pantser, but how did you approach like writing this novel or your novels in general? Like, do you have any kind of an outline, or do you just kind of start writing and see what happens?
I pretty much always start with a character in mind, and usually I'll have some sense of the journey I want them to go on. For this novel, I actually did try to write an outline. It made no sense, and there's very little evidence of that outline in the final book because at about a third of the way in, I just gave up on the outline. It was terrible.
Yeah.
So mostly I like to think of it as like driving at night, where you kind of know where you started and you know where you're going to end up, ideally, unless you accidentally like drive into the ocean. But you can only really see as far as your headlights shine.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're on a straightaway and you can see a lot, and sometimes you're about to curve and you can only see a little. And I feel like that sums up my writing process in a lot of ways. That said, a lot of times, and it's almost always while I'm trying to fall asleep, I'll like sit up and have some ideas and I'll jot them down. And so as I'm writing, I constantly have like below the writing in the document, I have like things that I think might happen next, that I either do that and then erase it, or don't do it and then still erase it.
Yeah.
Which definitely plays havoc with my word count some days. If I like erase a bunch of notes and then it looks like I've only written 200 words that day.
Yeah.
And I'm like, ugh. So it's rough. It's rough on the streets.
I'm like a really intense plotter, so we're like polar opposites. I like recently finished my first draft of my first contemporary book that's going to come out in winter 2024. Yeah, I'm really excited. And that outline, I know.
They're everywhere.
They're everywhere. And that outline, I think, finished out at like 52 pages long. Like I know my outline
basically the book.
They kind of turned into like 0 drafts. I'm very intense. I follow Jessica Brody's like 15-point beat sheet like religiously. So we're very different. I am fascinated. Oh my God, it's incredible. If you're ever interested in plotting, which doesn't really seem to work for you, which is fine. But
I would like to, I only ever written one book from an outline, and that was the second Darius book. And for some reason, it just worked. I found that literally every book just requires a different set of tools.
Yeah.
And the process is going to be different. And so maybe someday I will need these 50 beats. So I'm gonna look them up.
Yeah, it's called Save the Cat Writes a Novel by Jessica Brody. It's incredible.
I have heard of
any like if there's anyone in the chat who likes to write, it's a great resource. Speaking of resources, did you have to do any like research into boy bands or music industry, or did you find anything interesting out? Because I just I wouldn't know how to write about like what it's like being on tour and that kind of like background information.
So I did do a lot of research. Thankfully, a lot of boy bands and just a lot of musicians in general have put out like tour documentaries. Which One Direction in particular has a really, really good one that Morgan Spurlock directed.
Oh my gosh.
Which is like really honest at times, where they're literally one time they're all like sitting around a staged campfire, but they end up having this really deep conversation of like, do you think we'll still be in a band? Do you think we'll still be friends in 5 years? And
that's sweet.
Obviously some of them are not. So it was like weirdly honest. I actually did also, there's a book called Larger Than Life, A History of Boy Bands. That I read, that's by a pop culture historian that really dove deeply into like the history of boy bands, but also like the archetypes that go into them. Because there are like archetypes that repeat of like the baby and like the group dad and the funny one and the sexy one. And that was really useful. In my day job, I had a lot of experience with event production and like life backstage, as well as traveling for shows. And then I did a lot of Google image searching of different venues.
That's smart.
I was stuck at home in a pandemic and decided to go and look at all the places where I could be seeing concerts but didn't get to.
You're like, listen, I have time. That's cool. I like that. So talking about your main characters, the protagonists in your first 2 YA novels, Darius.
I usually say Darius, but he answers to most things.
Yeah. Darius is Iranian American, and then we have Hunter, the protagonist of Kids and Tell, who is white but has an Iranian American love interest. Can you tell us why you wanted to write the story from the perspective of a white character, and can you talk a bit about why it was important to you for readers to see an Iranian American love interest?
Yeah, very early on, actually no. Well, Hunter started out as white back in 2014 because I didn't know you were allowed to write about not white people.
Yeah, that was also news to me for a while.
Right. And when I started rewriting, I was like, should I change it? But I very quickly realized I wanted to interrogate the kind of gross and insidious ways that racism still operates within the queer communities, particularly among white cisgender gay men who are just the worst sometimes.
Yeah.
And so in order to say what I wanted to say and interrogate when I wanted to interrogate, it felt like Hunter had to stay white because the call had to come from inside the house.
Yeah.
But having come from both Darius books, I was very aware of that one of the things that drives me is to center queer Iranians in kind of everything I do. And so then it made 100% sense that therefore Hunter had to have an Iranian American love interest. And I'd never written one before, and it was really fun and really like healing for my heart in a way to just write about someone like me being worthy of love and devotion, even when he's imperfect and even when he's messy, to just be seen as beautiful and desirable and all the things I never felt growing up.
Yeah.
So it was really liberating.
I love that. I'm like, yeah, I'm all about having that kind of a renaissance. Like for Cemetery Boys, that felt very freeing and reassuring to kind of like be like, look at this brown boy who is beautiful in all of his brownness. So I love that personally.
I'm also a fan.
Was there a scene that was particularly difficult for you to write, and then also like what was like maybe your favorite scene to write?
I always really struggle writing whenever people are fighting. I'm like, I want everyone to get along. I've spent so much time like developing these characters, and I do think, empathy is the key tool of a writer. And so even if they're making mistakes, like it's hard not to want to root for them and to be like, well, I'm still rooting for you, but you have to be a bit of an a-hole now. So those were all really hard. I think the number one, like most difficult thing though to write was Hunter's ex-boyfriend early on leaks some of their intimate text messages. And so I had to figure out a way to basically show the arc of the destruction of their relationship in like 4 screenshots of text messages.
Yeah.
And I was like, how can I condense all of this into something that like clearly shows what happened, and also that like, the public would like see Hunter as being the bad guy in it. And so it took so much editing. The scene used to be so long, and my editor Dana was like, there's a 4-image limit to tweets, right? Like 4 screenshots, that's what you have. And I was like, crap.
You're like, oh yeah.
So that was really, really tough.
I literally can't even imagine figuring out how to be that concise.
Yeah, I'm still not 100% certain I pulled it off, but I definitely feel like I did the best I was capable of doing, given that I was living in a global pandemic. And on the flip side, wait, did you ask me what my favorite things to write were? I can't remember.
Yeah.
Okay. So peppered throughout the book are little interstitials of like BuzzFeed quizzes and like interview transcripts, and occasionally like bad faith think pieces. And all of the bad faith think pieces were the most fun I have ever had writing. I just got to pretend to be an a-hole on the internet for a couple pages. And I was like, oh, is this why people like writing villains so much? Because you just get to be like, just summon up the darkness within and just like let it rip. Because like you know, I feel bad for Hunter, but also Hunter's fake. He cannot be harmed by
Right.
these fake think pieces. It was really, really fun to just write all the awful things, kind of distill all the awful things that various people write on the internet about queer
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
And just make them look like total, you know, a-holes.
Yeah.
But
That multimedia like aspect is so fun and like so cool. I love that in books. And okay, so usually when I have characters and like figuring out their personalities and their quirks, I kind of start stealing things from people I know and giving those traits to like my characters. Are there any instances of that? Like, was a character inspired by somebody, or did you like steal from like something that you like saw someone do or wear or say?
I don't think I based any of the characters off of anyone. I definitely, so Hunter and his bandmates like to play pranks on each other.
Yeah.
And I may have definitely stolen like pranks from my high school and college years and have them play them on each other. Also during the pandemic, I became very obsessed with the video game Overcooked.
Oh yeah.
My friends played it online a lot, or the people in my germ circle, we would play it together. And so I was like, you know what? Hunter and his bandmates now play Overcooked on the tour bus. Like that's what they do. So that was very much borrowed from me and my friends' lives.
That's fun. I like that. And so kind of talking more about the story, what do you hope that readers will walk away with after reading Kiss and Tell?
Oh, well, I hope they'll walk away with a copy of the book, which they can purchase from
Right. Our lovely friends at Powell's.
On the one hand, this always feels a little bit like a cop-out, but I do truly believe and hope that anyone who reads the book will come away from it with like whatever they most need in that moment. Because I feel like reading a book is such a personal experience. But more broadly, especially any young person who reads it, I hope that they will walk away from it with a sense of their own power to change the world for the better, to speak up for what they want and to set healthy boundaries for themselves, to be willing to ask for grace and to offer grace when people ask for it in return, and to just be gay and do crimes.
I love that. Those are all fantastic messages, especially that last one. It's one of my personal favorites.
Exactly.
So I would love to know what kind of books that you're reading now or that you've loved recently. And while we're going over that, folks in the chat, don't forget to submit your Q&A answers because we're going to move on to that next.
Oh, what have I read? Right now I'm reading Craft in the Real World by Matthew Salesses. I'm not sure. I've never heard it pronounced out loud. But it's a really great book about kind of decolonizing the very notion of writing craft. It turns out the Iowa maybe people know this, but the Iowa Writers Workshop, the first creative writing MFA program in the United States, was literally done to spread American cultural hegemony and fight communism. Like that's what its goal was. And my mind was blown, and it's still being blown by this book. So that's really cool. I recently listened on audiobook to From Hollywood with Love, The Rise and Fall and Rise Again of the Hollywood rom-com, which was delightful. I recently read Leo Min's Beating Heart Baby, which is a phenomenal debut coming out in a couple months, I think.
Ooh.
Highly recommend. Tessa Gratton's Moondark Smile, which comes out in June, the sequel to Nightshine. This one is even gayer. I loved it. And I also, after you agreed to do this event with me, I reread Cemetery Boys to remind myself of what happened. But this time I listened to it on audiobook, and it was really great, but it was a very different experience. I didn't realize it was going to be, which is weird because I've done that before, but still, every time it surprises me the way an experience of a book changes when you listen to it.
Avi,
I just got to fall in love with it all over again. So that was really fun.
It's great. I'm obsessed with audiobooks, and Avi Roque, who is my audiobook narrator, they're just incredible. I'm obsessed. I just
felt like I was on the streets of LA with, Yadriel.
Yes.
It was just, I don't know, there was something, it just captured it. It was so nice.
Yeah, it's really wonderful. I love audiobooks. I don't know if you ever experience this, but I get like low key embarrassed like listening to like someone reading my own writing, and I like don't know why. It's just very like, oh my God. And I'm constantly like self-editing as I'm like listening to it. It's like, oh, it should have been like this or something, like micro stuff.
I always have to wait like a few months before I can listen to the audiobook of my own stuff.
Yeah.
I have to get some distance from it and like forget what's in the book before I can listen to it again.
Same.
But I'm looking forward to eventually listening to the Kiss and Tell one, which is done by like a full production, which is my first time ever happening, and I'm like really excited.
I'm absolutely thrilled. I saw your announcement and I was like, yes, absolutely. I love this. I have been reading a lot of craft books lately. So the one I'm working on right now, getting through, is Never Say You Can't Survive by Charlie Jane Anders. And it's basically about how to like write through trauma and to like use that to tell stories and to tell like authentic stories. And that was really cool. And I am in the middle of an arc. Most of the books I read right now are advanced reader copies, so it's like I'm reading this great book that none of you can read for another 6 months. But I'm in the middle of The Whispering Dark by Kelly Andrew, and it is a dark academia fantasy, and it's kind of new adult. They're college aged, and the main character is a deaf girl who can hear whisperings of the dark, and it's super creepy, incredibly atmospheric, and if you're a dark academia fan, you should absolutely check it out. Awesome. Okay, so I'm gonna call Bailey back to guide us through the Q&A parts.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello again.
All right. Yeah, we have some great questions here.
Awesome.
Yeah. First off, I'll start with this one. For Adib, what aspect about Kiss and Tell are you most proud of?
Ooh.
That's a great question.
It is. Like, the glib answer is I'm proud that I finished it. I really felt like, in a way, I was writing two books in one. One was a story of Hunter going through stuff. Really grappling with what it means for him to exist as a queer person in the public eye, and also learning some like important lessons about decentering himself when it comes to the fight for queer liberation. At the same time, through all of the kind of interstitials, I was writing a second book about the way that we as a media consuming culture commodify and consume the identities of marginalized people. And I really wasn't sure until we got to like line edits and copy edits whether I had succeeded or not. And I feel like for the most part I did. And I don't usually like to like say nice things about myself. It makes me very uncomfortable, but I'm really, really proud of that. I think I did a pretty good job.
You absolutely did. Oh my gosh.
Thank you. Don't say that. I'll disappear.
I'm just
I have to turn my camera off.
Adib,
no, everyone should see my camera off.
Amazing.
It is Maura Rose with her wig inside out, because that sums up my feeling about being on Zoom all the time, always.
Okay. So for both authors, how do you write such great romance / chemistry?
You go first.
Gosh, I think usually when I figure out who my main character is, I'm like, what would be the best love interest for this character? So, for example, for Yadriel, he's very shy and like uncertain and is having all these internal struggles, and is like pretty reserved. And then so I was like, okay, so what kind of character would, be bringing something to Yads? Because, you can't just have like a love interest who has no reason of also being interested in your main character. Like, that adoration needs to go back and forth. So for me, it was important that Yads had a love interest who was very confident and very sure of himself, and who could kind of honestly like gas Yads up and like help him build his confidence and like poke holes in all of his excuses that Yads tends to use throughout Cemetery Boys in the beginning. And then at the same time, Yads is someone who really like centers and calms Julian down and also holds him accountable when he's, on his BS. So for me, that was really important. And when it comes to like the romance scenes, I usually come up with like small romantic like tension scenes randomly, and then I have suddenly a list of them, and it's like, okay, how can I shove these into like a plot that makes sense? And those are usually inspired by like songs or movies or TV shows. There's a whole like chapter and a half in Cemetery Boys when they're going to Malibu that's basically beat for beat the song East Side by Benny Blanco, Halsey, and Khalid. So if you listen to that, it just kind of takes you through a certain section of the book. And like, that's why Yads' dad has a blue Corvette Stingray, because there's a blue Corvette in the chorus of that song.
That's amazing. I think it's really generous of you to say that I write good romance, because I'm not sure that I do. That's something I really struggle with a lot. I think for me, a lot of compelling love interest is that by the end, each party in the romance calls to the other one's highest self, and so I have to ask myself like what that highest self could be, and then what actions do they have to take, what tests do they have to pass to get there. And as far as building tension, part of it's just remembering my own teenage years when I was a very hormonal teenager with lots of crushes I didn't understand on the cute boys in my class, and trying to kind of summon up those feelings, and the charged way when like a straight guy would just stand close to you because he didn't know that you were gay, and then you would be like, what is this body heat happening? Like what's happening? And then also lately, pretty much post 2020, anytime I'm writing romance, I'm just being like, what would Lan Wangji do? Because I'm obsessed with The Untamed.
Yes,
that's
right. That was our like pandemic discovery together. I remember like we were watching it like the same time. Oh my gosh, yes. Taste.
And so I'm just like, what would Noble Hong Wang-jun do right now?
Yeah.
And I would do that in the book, and that would help make it romantic.
I love that.
I do. I like basically like a few days before launch, I was like, I'm feeling emotionally adrift. Why don't I start watching The Untamed again? So I started my, I think probably 5th rewatch. It's hard to count because sometimes I would like dip into other people's rewatches like midstream and then go with them for a while. But I think all told, I've probably seen each episode like 5 times at least.
Yeah. I love that.
Great. Well, Scout would like to know, Adib, is Kiss and Tell gonna make me cry?
Oh, hi Scout. Scout and I met last week. Time is a flat circle. They're an amazing artist and illustrator that writes D and Doggos, which you should definitely pre-order. It's a graphic novel about dogs playing Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh my God, that sounds amazing.
I'm sorry, for copyright reasons, I think it's just tabletop games. I don't know where they landed on this front. Will Kiss and Tell make you cry? I don't know. I don't cry very often at books unless I'm on an airplane. But for the most part, if I'm at sea level, I don't cry very easily at all. I do think like the risk of crying is lower in Kiss and Tell than it was in like Darius the Great Is Not Okay, which at least I could like see why people would cry at some spots. I really hope Kiss and Tell will be more of the like laughing or the throwing the book across the room when someone does something that you're like, why are you being so foolish? Don't do that. And being mad at the characters for being silly and just not communicating. Hopefully, I think that makes the most sense to me. Yeah.
Excellent. So Maxwell asks, I became a big fan of yours because of how you portrayed mental illness, depression in Darius. Does this theme follow in Kiss and Tell or in any of your future planned books? He says, can't wait to read Kiss and Tell.
Oh, thank you. I don't think mental illness plays a huge role in Kiss and Tell. There are times when Hunter definitely deals with anxiety and kind of a borderline panic attack at one point, but it is an acute thing and not a chronic thing. He is not living with mental illness. It's really weird. Maybe one day I'll return to writing about mental illness, but I wrote both Darius books when I was in a really good place mental health wise, and I felt able to like look at it and write about it. And given how hard the pandemic has been, I don't think I can write about mental illness for a little while without making myself spiral. But it is, yeah, it's something I'm very passionate about and has been a big part of my life. And I hope one day I'll get back to the point where I can have more to say about it.
Okay, so from Craig, for both, do you think an all-gay boy band could actually break into mainstream pop culture?
I think it should.
Oh. I don't know. I'm feeling a little pessimistic right now with all of the homophobic and transphobic and bigoted legislation coming down the pipeline, and the kind of supreme cowardice we're seeing from a lot of corporate interests, because so much of the music industry is still at the whim of corporate America. Even if you're not like signed with a major label, which is owned by no doubt some sort of media conglomerate, you require the internet, things like Amazon Web Services, to get your songs out into the world. You require, if you're going to play in venues, you most likely have to deal with Live Nation, which is a freaking racket. Call your congressperson and ask them to investigate Live Nation and break it up. There's got to be some sort of antitrust action. So while it definitely should, I think if it's going to, it's not going to come from the United States.
I agree.
I don't know. There's very few places in the world that I would consider like really ideal for queer liberation, but there are definitely places that are further along than the United States is in a lot of ways. And I think, this is getting deep. I do think in a lot of ways, the United States is lagging behind on a lot of issues that we as a nation used to be more passionate about and kind of lead the charge on. Sorry, I didn't mean to be such a bummer.
No, that's all great and important points.
But I absolutely would support such a boy band if and when.
Oh my God, I would be obsessed.
But in a not creepy way, because again, I'm a little old now.
All right. Edith asks, is there anything you wished you could have put into the book Kiss and Tell that you didn't get a chance to?
That's one of my favorite questions.
That's such a mean question.
I know.
I had a lot more interstitials written that did not make it into the final cut, including a few more fake BuzzFeed quizzes, a few more song lyrics that I worked really hard on. I feel like looking back over it, whenever I read passages, I kind of wish I had left a little more breathing room in. It reads very fast to me now. Whereas at the time, as I was writing it, it felt really, really slow. But Hunter's an impulsive dude, and he just like, he goes. But I do wish I could have gone, if I could do it all again, I would just go back and give a few moments where he gets to breathe a little more. Yeah, I think that's my answer.
Ekaterina asks, Adib, there's a presence of Pink Floyd in the book, which was such a wonderful surprise. Could you talk a bit about it? And thank you.
Yes. I don't know if you can see my beautiful David Gilmour poster right behind me from when I saw him live in Chicago in 2016. Pink Floyd is my favorite band, which is funny because I hated them growing up. My sister was obsessed with them. My sister is a few years older than me. And so when she kind of got into them in like late middle school, early high school, she had a CD of Pulse, their live album from the 1995-96 Division Bell tour. And she played it on repeat really loudly from her boombox. And so I hated it because I was hearing it all the time. And I just never wanted to hear Shine On You Crazy Diamond ever again. But then I went away to college and I grew up and I happened to hear it like when I was out and about one day. And I was like, oh, I'm older now and this isn't being forced down my throat. I actually really like this music. So yeah, I've kind of, since my 20s, I've really loved Pink Floyd. I don't know why I identify so strongly with 4 white British baby boomers, but I don't know, a lot of their songs tap into something that is really meaningful to me. I took up playing guitar just so I could learn to play guitar very badly like David Gilmour. And I always try to reach for joy wherever I can when writing a book, filling it with things I like, which is one of the reasons why Darius is full of tea and Star Trek, because I love those things. And so when I got to write about music, I slipped in a bunch of Pink Floyd references, and also lots of just other things I liked, which is why there are so many little untamed Easter eggs in the book as well. Also Spinal Tap, which is delightful. But yeah, I don't know. I love Pink Floyd and everyone else should as well. I promise not to play it on repeat for you though, such that you can hear it through your bedroom wall while you're trying to fall asleep.
And that kind of segues into Randon Sprinkle asked how many references to Star Trek are in Kiss and Tell?
I don't think there are any that I put on purpose. There might be a few accidental ones because it is always on my brain. But yeah, I can't remember. I don't think I deliberately left any in there.
Okay. Rachel would like to know for both authors, why YA over adult?
So my short answer is I don't think I'm enough of an adult to like be able to properly write adult. Like I'm just like I am like a full grown like adult, but I just don't think I'm like mentally there yet. So that's personally why I don't write adult. But I also think that there's a lot of fun and freedom that comes with writing YA, especially kind of blending genres, and adult things can be kind of more rigid. And I think we get to have more fun with YA, honestly. We kind of get to do silly, crazy things and just have like a good time without, without having too many expectations or stipulations, I guess. But it's mostly because I don't think I'm adult enough.
That makes me feel really old. I just want you to know.
I'm not young, to be clear. It's a mentality thing.
Fair. For me, I mean, adults are really boring when you think about it, especially adult literature. Back when I read like more widely, and I still read kind of widely, but I would like read boring adult literary fiction. And I swear there was one year where I think I read 3 books in a row about sad sack middle-aged white men getting divorces and developing celiac disease. And like, no offense to anyone that has to be gluten-free, like that's horrible. But like, I don't like, no offense, but if that's your character trait, you need to find a personality. And whereas Y was doing exciting things, I think everything is new and big when you're a teenager, and that's a really fun space to explore. And also just from a practical level, We Need Diverse Books has done a lot of good in making space for brownish people to tell their stories, for queer folks to tell their stories in a way that still adult fiction is lagging tremendously behind. And certain genres of adults are making more inroads, especially in speculative and romance. But both of those also still have plenty of weird racism going on. Just look at the puppies phenomenon from the Hugos. And despite its many foibles, young adult continues to make space for people like me to tell stories for kids like the kid I used to be. And so that feels like a really important thing to do.
Yeah, I feel like writing for young adults, like I'm actually doing something. I'm contributing something to society. I am, giving representation to kids, like you said, who were like me growing up, and like I never, ever, like according to media, I did not exist. So kind of, it feels really freeing, and it feels important, I guess, to be writing YA as opposed to adult.
That's great. Yeah. So we have our last question here. So if anyone else has a question they'd like to ask, now is the time. From Alana for Adib, I'm interested in your experience of writing a white perspective as a white person. I've dabbled with writing POC perspectives, but am very wary of getting it wrong.
Ooh. I think because, first of all, I grew up in Kansas City, Missouri. My mother is white, and it is impossible to live in this country without absorbing white culture kind of at every level. So it's, it's very easy for me to get in a white perspective because that's what I've been exposed to, and that's what in some ways I was programmed to do my entire life. Aside from my name, I'm fairly pale-skinned, especially in the wintertime. I'm not that hard to like mix up with the actual white kids in school as long as they don't ask my name. And so in a way, I just grew up thinking I was kind of one of the white kids. Certainly that changed after the September 11th attacks when I was in high school. And that was kind of my first experience of being very violently othered. Not like physical violence, but emotionally violently othered. But even then, white cultural hegemony is just everywhere. And so it was very easy to write from that. I also think from a systemic perspective, it is almost impossible for any author to write something about whiteness that people will then say, oh, this is the totality of whiteness, and this is the rubric by which I will now judge all white people. And the opposite is not true for people of color. Any member of a marginalized community, when they create stories about those people, someone will always hold up that book, that television show, that movie, and say, this is all that these people are. This is who they are, and this is their totality. And so, yeah, it is a heavy responsibility to delve into those spaces if you don't belong to that community. That said, something I try to let guide myself is the idea that people are rarely harmed by someone partaking in a joy that is not theirs, but people are often harmed when someone minds a pain that is not theirs. And I try to let that guide me as best I can, and that's usually the advice I give to anyone trying to write outside their experience. Sorry, that sounded really, really pedantic, didn't it?
No, that
Yeah,
was
great.
like
Yeah.
the most beautiful thing I've ever heard in my entire life. That was
You know what
wonderful.
it is I spend a lot of time talking to Tessa Gratton, and it rubs off eventually. She's scary smart.
So we got a few more questions in from Craig for both. Any future middle grade books? Your voices would be great in that space.
Ooh.
Adib, you go first.
I really would love to write middle grade. Right now, I don't have any immediate plans. I would have to find the right story for it. I actually have one idea, but I still like it's more of a vibe. So I'm waiting to figure out what it is that I want to say and why it's important to say it in middle grade. But I would love to. Middle grade, like, kids are amazing. School visits when you're a middle grade author are extremely awesome. So I would like to figure it out someday.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested in it. I think my biggest problem is that I can never shut up. So like writing like an economically sized book for middle grade would be really hard for me, I think. Yeah, it's not great. But I I love middle grade, and some of my favorite books are middle grade, like the Percy Jackson series. I mean, obviously, because the Sunbearer Trials, I comp as being Mexican Percy Jackson meets the Hunger Games. So I mean, that those series were so important to me, as were like the Animorphs, another incredible middle grade book series.
So queer in a way that no one talks about.
Sure. And so heavy. Like, there's so many of these really heavy topics that can be explored in middle grade, and so that I'm very drawn to that. But kind of the same with Adib. Like, I have a lot of vibes, but I haven't nailed down the right story yet.
I don't get how so much of people, like kids growing up in the 90s, I don't understand how any of them could grow up reading Animorphs and then grow up Republican. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
Like, it's so
Animorphs is so good.
Anti-capitalist, like everything. Some people just miss the message, I guess.
Yeah, perhaps the perfect series.
All right, and then Rachel would like to know for Aiden, it was if he had a chance to add anything to Cemetery Boys, what would it be?
How the turntables.
I do kind of have an answer for this, and if I had had more time and more space, I would have explored Lady Death a bit more, and like because she's in conversation with Santa Muerte, and that is a very important folklore saint within Mexican Catholicism, but also very hotly debated. And so I think I made her a little too friendly and approachable. So if I had had more time, I kind of would have unpacked who she is and what she does a bit more. Because right now I think I made her seem a little too soft, and she's actually a very complicated deity. So I think I would have liked to have explored her a bit more. But maybe I will have that space in the future. We'll see.
Mm-hmm. Maybe you can write the extended edition.
Maybe a sequel.
Maybe a sequel. You heard it here first, folks. Aiden definitely is writing the sequel.
No, and I think
that's definitely not I tease. I have no insider knowledge, but also if there is one, you can feel free to email it to me. Just saying.
Good to know. I'll write that down.
All right, and I think we have a great question to end on here. For both, what kind of stories are you hoping to tell in the future?
Oh.
Well, I have sold some that are coming. So I have my duology, the Sunbearer duology that's coming out, which, like I said, is kind of high fantasy, but like they have technology, and that's Mexican Percy Jackson meets the Hunger Games. It's really fun. I'm so excited for that one to come out. After that, I have my first contemporary that I mentioned. Right now, its title is Just Max, and it is about a stealth trans boy. So looking at him, you wouldn't know that he's trans, and he's not out as trans to many people, starting his first year of college. And his plan is to have his own apartment and then just kind of get through college without drawing too much attention. But because of a technical issue, he actually gets put into a co-ed dorm where he has to share a kitchen and a bathroom and a common space. And what does that mean, being, a trans guy who's trying to be stealth? So it's very funny. There's a lot of foibles. And he gets a crush on the boy living down the hall who offers to tutor him in math. And then I have my first sci-fi book coming out, because I decided that'll be easy. And right now the working title is just Gay Titanic in Space, which kind of is the whole plot.
I can already hear Celine Dion echoing.
Right?
I love
She's on the playlist.
For me, oh my gosh, I think the only thing of mine I have lots of other things coming out, but I think the only one that's public knowledge is I have a short story in an anthology coming out this fall called Eternally Yours. It's a paranormal romance anthology, and my short story is about queer merfolk and soulmates. Definitely not at all inspired by The Untamed in any way, shape, or form. And,
I'm so excited.
As far as just things I wish, I would like to keep writing about books and my wish is to find new and interesting ways to keep writing about queer Iranian Americans and about queer liberation and about deconstructing toxic masculinity and about decolonizing our mindsets. Those are the things that are really interesting to me. And I hope I can always find new and interesting and fun things to say about them. And fingers crossed, I did do that in the things that I have written that haven't been announced yet. We'll see. Everything is so slow sometimes.
Yeah, truly.
All right, well, we've reached the top of the hour here. So just want to thank you for joining us. It was a real pleasure to host both Adib and Aiden and welcome all of you here. Please consider purchasing a copy of Kiss and Tell or Aiden's novels here by visiting us at powells.com. I've linked that in the chat for you. I've also added a link to our YouTube channel where this event will be posted in the next couple of days. So if you'd like to rewatch or if you want to share with someone who wasn't able to attend tonight, you can do that there. We look forward to seeing you all at another one of our events again soon. And until then, just take care and thank you all for being here so much.
Thank you so much. Adib, so much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. This was so fun.
Absolute pleasure.
It was a joy.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Be gay, do crime.
Bye.
Bye.